The scissors flashed inches from Emma's ear, and the entire dining room went silent. One hard pull had already torn a fistful of blonde hair from her head, and now her manager stood over her with another lock clenched in his fist. In front of dozens of wealthy guests, the young waitress was crying so hard she could barely breathe. But the reason he was cutting her hair was even more shocking. She had dared to feed a homeless man with food from the restaurant. Before we go any further, if you believe people deserve a second chance and that kindness should never be punished, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, leave a comment, and subscribe to Bright Heart Second Chances. You never know whose heart might be changed by one small act of kindness. The morning had begun like any other for Emma. She arrived before sunrise at the elegant Riverside Grand, tied her red uniform neatly around her waist, pinned her name badge over her heart, and checked the dining room before the first guests arrived. Emma was 24 and carried a quiet determination that most people never noticed. She worked 2 jobs, sent money to her mother, and was saving every spare dollar to finish nursing school. She had learned that life could be unfair, but being poor did not mean being powerless. That afternoon, a charity luncheon filled the restaurant with important guests. Crystal glasses sparkled beneath chandeliers. Waiters moved like clockwork, and every table was covered with food that cost more than Emma sometimes spent on groceries in a week. Her manager, Victor Hale, watched everything with a cold, calculating eye. He cared about rules, appearances, and money. He had warned the staff repeatedly that nobody from the street was to be allowed near the entrance, especially during private events. Then Emma saw him. An older homeless man stood outside the tall glass doors, thin beneath a torn coat, his gray beard tangled by the wind. He wasn't shouting or begging. He simply stood there looking through the window at the food. Emma noticed something that others didn't. His hands were trembling. For a moment, she remembered her father, who had died years earlier after losing his job and spending months sleeping in his car. That memory broke something open inside her. When a table returned an untouched roast chicken dinner, Emma wrapped the food in a clean container. She added bread, vegetables, and a small dessert. She slipped outside during a quiet moment and handed it to the man. His eyes filled with tears. He bowed his head, holding the container as if it were treasure. Emma smiled and hurried back inside. She didn't know Victor had seen everything. The manager cornered her near the service station. His face was red with anger. He told her she had violated company policy, embarrassed the restaurant, and risked upsetting the guests. Emma tried to explain that the food would have been thrown away anyway. She offered to pay for it from her wages. But Victor wasn't interested in explanations. He wanted to make an example of her. In front of the staff, he ordered Emma to stand in the center of the dining room. Guests began turning in their chairs. Some whispered. Others raised their phones. Emma's hands shook as Victor announced that anyone who ignored his orders would face consequences. Then he grabbed her hair. The first snip sounded louder than it should have. Emma gasped as a thick strand fell onto the polished floor. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Victor continued, claiming that if she wanted to act without permission, she could live with the humiliation. The guests stared. A woman covered her mouth. A waiter looked down in shame. An elderly guest slowly stood, but fear kept him frozen. Emma closed her eyes and thought about quitting. She thought about nursing school, her mother's tired face, and all the nights she had worked until her feet hurt. She wondered if kindness had been a foolish mistake. Then something unexpected happened. From the doorway came the sound of slow footsteps. The homeless man had returned, but he was no longer hunched over. He walked through the restaurant with his shoulders straight, his eyes calm, and an old leather folder tucked beneath one arm. The room fell silent as he approached the table nearest Emma. Victor turned toward him, furious, demanding that security remove him. The man did not move. Instead, he placed the folder on the table and opened it. Inside were photographs, newspaper clippings, legal documents, and a faded picture of a much younger man standing beside the Riverside Grand. The guests leaned forward. Emma stared in confusion. The man finally revealed who he was. His name was Samuel Reed, and 20 years earlier, he had been the owner of the Riverside Grand. The room seemed to lose its air. Samuel explained that after a business partner betrayed him and stole millions, he lost the hotel, his home, and eventually his family. He had spent years moving from shelter to shelter, too ashamed to tell anyone who he had once been. Recently, however, he He had discovered evidence proving that the hotel had been transferred through fraud. His attorneys had been working quietly, and that very morning, a court ruling had restored his ownership. Victor's face went pale. Samuel then looked at Emma. He told the room that she was the first person in years to treat him like a human being instead of a problem. She had not asked his name or demanded an explanation. She had simply seen someone hungry and helped him. Then he turned toward Victor and looked at the scissors still in his hand. Samuel told him that a restaurant could survive losing money, customers, and even its reputation. But a place that punished compassion had already lost something far more valuable. Victor slowly lowered the scissors. Samuel did not fire him immediately. Instead, he asked Victor to look at the hair scattered across the floor and understand what he had done. Then Samuel removed the manager badge from Victor's uniform and announced that Victor was no longer in charge. He turned to Emma and offered her something she never expected. Samuel asked her to become the restaurant's community outreach coordinator while finishing nursing school. He promised that unsold food would be donated every night to local shelters and that no hungry person would ever again be turned away simply because they couldn't afford a meal. Emma stood there crying, but these were different tears. Weeks later, her hair had begun growing back. Guests who had witnessed the incident returned, not because of the fancy dining room, but because the Riverside Grand had become known for something greater than luxury. Every evening, volunteers packed meals for shelters. Emma studied between shifts. Her mother watched proudly as her daughter moved closer to becoming a nurse. And Samuel never forgot the woman who fed him when he had nothing to offer in return. One evening, Emma found him sitting quietly near the same glass doors where she had first seen him. He handed her an envelope. Inside was a scholarship covering the rest of her nursing education. Emma tried to refuse, but Samuel reminded her that kindness had once been given to him without conditions. Now it was his turn to pass it forward. Years later, Emma became a nurse and continued visiting shelters on her days off. She kept one small lock of the hair Victor had cut from her head, not as a reminder of humiliation, but as a reminder that one painful moment had changed the direction of her life. And whenever someone asked her why she had risked everything to feed a stranger, Emma remembered the trembling hands holding that first meal. Sometimes, she would say that hunger does not ask what a person used to be. Neither should kindness. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who believes people can change, and subscribe to Bright Heart Second Chances. Your support helps stories like this reach someone who may need a little hope today. And before you go, comment the words "kindness comes back" if you believe that a good heart is never wasted, even when nobody seems to notice. Because sometimes, the person standing outside the door is not there to take something from us. Sometimes, they are there to remind us who we are.